Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the webinar on behavioral interviewing hosted by the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved. We're so glad you've decided to spend some of your afternoon with us today. And we're really excited about this content and this chance to work with you on this very exciting recruitment issue. My name is Allison Abe-Sekara. I'm the Director of Training and Technical Assistance here at the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved. We'll be running this webinar today, and before we get started with our presenter, just wanted to draw your attention to some housekeeping items, as well as go over a list of all the free, I said it once, I'll say it again, free resources, training, and technical assistance available to health centers today. So first, some matters of housekeeping. We are recording this session now, and a webinar of this session will be available on our website shortly after today's session. I'd like to draw your attention to your GoToWebinar screen on the right-hand side. You'll see questions, handouts, and chat. If you have a question throughout the webinar, you can put it in the questions box or the chat box. We'll make sure to address it, and we will have some dedicated question and answer time at the end of this session. I'd also like to draw your attention to the handouts section there. There you'll see there's two handouts available, one of which is a copy of all the slides for today. Many of the slides have links to active resources for you, so I'd encourage you to go ahead and download those slides in the handout section. You can follow along on your own, or you can have those later for your own reference. A copy of those handouts will also be made available on our website. If you have any technical challenges throughout the webinar, please send a chat message to the STAR Center staff person listed in the chat window. Somebody will be able to help you. And that's it for housekeeping. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to send us a note and let us know. Moving on to the free resources and technical assistance available to you today, we wanted to share with you all the resources that we have here at ACU through our STAR Center project. ACU receives a national cooperative agreement from the Bureau of Primary Health Care to provide free resources, training, and technical assistance to health centers and lookalikes to help them address their workforce challenges. So there's actually a whole network of national cooperative agreements like us. We're the only recruitment and retention one, but there's a whole cadre of people out there who are ready to support you. Again, I mentioned ours focuses on recruitment and retention. The home for that project is at chcworkforce.org, the link that's on your screen. And again, the link is live in the handouts that you have there. We have a whole host of resources available for you. And those are available, again, on our CHC Workforce website. Here's a list of just some of the ones that we have. I'd like to draw your attention to a self-assessment tool that's available, again, for free. Just lives on our website to help you assess your own recruitment and retention challenges. We also have a key informant interview report and a whole host of other interviews, resources, handbooks, etc. available in our resource center at chcworkforce.org. Almost all of those resources are free. There are about 150 of them right now, and that's always growing. We have a best practice form if you are doing something great at your health center and want to share it with us so that we can share it with others. Please go ahead and check that out and fill that out for us. We want to hear about all the great work you're doing. And if you want to keep up to date on what we're doing, you can sign up for our newsletter that comes out monthly and keeps you up to date on new resources, new trainings, new webinars, etc. We also have data profiles available. Those are individual recruitment and retention data profiles for every single health center in the country, over 1,300 profiles. It looks at about 65 different data points and gives you a real sense of how your health center is doing compared to other health centers on the workforce spectrum. So there's a lot more to say about that, but I will move on. If you have questions about any of this, please again just go to chcworkforce.org and contact us. We do have a whole host of training, including this monthly webinar series. That link is in your handouts as well. You can stay up to date on what we're doing with PCAs and with our advisory groups, as well as online education. Again, you can find that information through our newsletter to be up to the minute on what's happening here. And the last big bucket of things we do is that free personalized technical assistance. We work with a group of highly educated and qualified consultants, people like Ann, to answer your questions and to help you through your recruitment and retention challenges. So all you need to do to access that is just reach out to us. There is a request TA button on our website that you can also call or email us anytime. And my contact information will be available in just a couple of slides. So that's us. Remember, free resources, training, technical assistance. And we're going to be doing, as part of that project, this monthly webinar series. The great Ann Hogan is going to be conducting today's session on behavioral interviewing, but our next webinar is going to be with Richard Finnegan to talk about stay interviews. That's going to be in February, so you can go to our website or click on the registration link in the handouts in order to get more information on that webinar and get up to date on that retention topic. So here's the information for me, my direct contact information, as well as the Star Center contact information. We have staff and other folks standing by to be helpful to you. And we'd love to answer your questions at any time. So without further ado, I thank you all for your patience as I talked about all those things. I know you're really excited about what Ann's going to talk about today. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ann. She is just a great person to hear from today. She has over 25 years of experience in the human resources field, including employee relations, benefits and compensation management, conflict resolution, employee development, and strategic planning. She actually joined a health center in 1996. She was the Vice President of Human Resources for Salud Family Health Centers in Colorado, and she, as of last summer, started her own HR consulting business. She is a certified senior professional in human resources and is a professional member of the Society of Human Resource Management, the American Society of Healthcare Human Resources Administration, and the American Society of Training. We're thrilled and honored to have her talking with you all today, and so I'm going to turn it over to Ann now.
Thank you, Allison. Let's see if we technically got this correct here. We can change the slide. They haven't been switched over.
Okay, I'm going to manage it for now, and then if you have any further problems, just give a holler and we'll figure it out. Thanks, Ann.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so welcome to all of you to the first webinar of 2016. I'm excited to be able to kick off this monthly event. I think there will be some great upcoming speakers. And since the Powerball is so high at over $1 billion, I kind of relate that to interviewing because it's always a gamble to some extent who you can, who you hire and how you increase your odds of selecting a winner. And by using the technique of behavioral interviewing, that can increase those odds. This webinar is going to give you knowledge of behavioral interviewing, and by implementing this strategy in your hiring practices, it will increase your likelihood of selecting a good fit for your organization. I can almost guarantee it'll help. It won't guarantee a good fit. It'll help you get there. So today we'll review employment laws that affect your interview process, review what a recruitment plan should include, and if you don't have one, you will want to implement one. Review question types for an interview, discuss the technique using behavioral interviewing, which is similar to motivational interviewing, which you use a lot of times for your patients anyway currently. Review examples of behavioral interview questions, and talk about the resources that are available to assist you with recruiting or any other needs that you may have. Like Allison said, my background, if you want to advance the slide, Allison. if you give that back to me, I think I could probably do it once the leg delays. My background is 25 years in HR, 19 years in the Migrant Community Health Center as the VP of HR. I've recruited all levels of staff, anything from the physicians, dentists, to front desk staff, medical assistants, facility staff, etc. In all areas, remote sites as well as in cities. So one thing I want to kind of go through really quick is we need to go through kind of employment law, because you are doing interviewing and you need to be aware of the laws that are out there. Not all of the employment laws, I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but these are the big ones that are enforced by the EEOC. There are many more that are individual to each state or even the city, and so I want you to be aware that you can find those laws for your state on the Department of Labor website, and I'm sure they'll have them all laid out for you there, and you can either Google Department of Labor for your state or Department of Personnel, is what it's called also in some states. But here are the big ones when it comes to interviewing. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you cannot discriminate based on race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. It's illegal to discriminate against pregnant people since 1978. And the Age Discrimination Act of 1967 protects everyone over the age of 40. So you are able to say this person is not old enough for the job if they're younger than that, as long as it's not based on something else. But you cannot discriminate on people over 40. Title I of the American Disabilities Act, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act went into effect in 2008, which means you cannot use genetic information to discriminate against someone. So it can't be any kind of genetic information, whether it has to do with their intelligence, that you think that based on their genes they could be more intelligent, or based on their genes they may have more propensity to get ill, all sorts of things. So then also the state and local laws, and these laws may be tougher and take precedence over federal laws. So you need to be aware of whatever state or municipality you're in. You need to be aware of those laws that affect your hiring. And let's just talk real quick about environment. And do you want to launch the poll question? The first one is, do you know that your unemployment rate for your area? Does anyone know that? And we won't spend too long on those polls, but do you have an idea of what your environment looks like as far as unemployment for your area? And if you're in kind of a big area, just kind of pick something and say, yeah, I know, or no, I have no idea what it is. Mariah, should we give them just the next couple seconds? It's a pretty easy question. Okay, so a significant amount of you don't know your environment, and that's okay, but I'm going to tell you why it's important to find that out. So if we can go back to the slides, and your employment environment really helps you understand how difficult it may be to hire someone or not hire someone within your area. They say that, all the experts say that if your unemployment rate is 5% or less, everyone who wants to be working, you can challenge that, but this is what they say, anyone who wants to be working is already working. So then your recruitment strategy and your interview strategy is even tougher to get the right fit for you. If you have a higher unemployment, say like in Mississippi, which is at 6%, then you may have a bigger selection. Those in Vermont or in Iowa, you pretty much don't have a selection of who you're going to get to hire. It's kind of whoever applies, you're probably going to take them. But before you do that, we're going to employ some techniques of used in behavioral interviewing to make that a better fit. Now, how many of you have a recruitment plan? And we only have 3 poll questions, so we're not going to do this all day. But how many of you have a recruitment plan? And again, it's yes or no, or you're not sure about it. And if you don't have one, I'm going to tell you why it's important to have one. And if you have one, what should be included? Good. So a significant amount of you do have one. At least 50% of you do. There's a good chunk that say no, and I'm going to tell you why it's important. And those that are unsure, you'll want to make sure that if you have one, you know where it is, or if you don't have one, to be sure to implement one. A recruitment plan goes through these different portions. So the elements that you need to have in place is a no discrimination policy, your philosophy and responsibilities as far as what they are as an organization in the hiring process, where you're going to advertise. That's always important to lay out because it gives you a plan, because if you don't have that plan in place, it won't get acted upon. So you may advertise in different places for different positions within your organization, but it's always best to have that written down, kind of the basics at least. Are you going to advertise online? What are those sites? What are the sites that you're going to go after for positions? They're probably different than where you're going to go after a dentist or a medical assistant or a dental assistant, etc. So you want to kind of lay those out, what's worked in the past, and where you're going to target those advertisement dollars. Make sure you have a fair and equitable selection process. You should have some type of Excel spreadsheet maybe, or some type of template that gives you the questions that you're going to use for interviewing, how you're going to rate those people. So what does that process look like that makes it fair and equitable? Then your application process. You obtain applications online, on paper, or do you just have people submit a resume? What does that application process look like? Is it easy? And that's important to look at from an organizational standpoint because a lot of people have a great application that looks really good online, but it's not easy for people to access. So you want to look at your application process and then your selection process. And your selection process is, how did you make that final selection? Did you have people ranked? Did you just like this person better than the other person? What was your selection process like? You want to have all of that documented just so you make the best decision you can. And the selection process is kind of like having 3 doors that all look alike, and you're not sure which one to pick. And so actually all the candidates sometimes appear the same. So today with the behavioral interviewing, we'll help you decide which door is the best one to open when they all look alike. So interview question type. And all of you have probably had some type of schooling as far as interview or question types, you know, closed-ended question, open-ended questions, all the different types of questions. And the 2 we're going to focus on today really is the closed-ended questions or the direct yes or no answers. And what we're going to focus on more is the behavioral-based open-ended questions. So a closed-ended question is like this. Are you a team player? Yes or no? And the problem with this type of question, and it's in a lot of people's interview information, is that they're going to say yes because they think they are a team player. The behavioral-based questions will help you identify that maybe they're not a team player, but they say they are. So this is a good example of a question that you don't want to be closed-ended. What you do want to be closed-ended about is when you need a very direct answer. So are you able to work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.? Yes or no? Are you willing to work overtime? Yes or no? Have you ever been convicted of Medicaid or Medicare fraud? Very important question. You need a yes or no answer to that. So it's probably the biggest mistake when people start interviewing is that they like to ask questions that are very closed-ended because they don't know how else to ask the question. So that's what we're going to work on because it doesn't really give you any information when you do this. Let's see, Mariah, something went wrong with my screen. If you can advance it for me, that'd be great. So behavior-based questions. Oh, we're supposed to do a poll, that's why. Let's do a poll real quick. The last poll is, do you currently use behavioral-based questions in your interviews? Yes or no, or you're not sure about that? And behavioral-based questions are really interesting because people can change, but when you think about those individuals that you've known for a long time, you begin to predict their future behavior based on what they've done in the past. And that's why we want to do behavioral-based questions. Great. So 71% of you use them in your interviews. That's fabulous. And so those that aren't or you're not sure, we're going to hopefully change that based on today. Behavioral-based questions are based on specific situations. It doesn't allow the interviewee to get around that information. They can't just answer with yes or no. You have follow-up questions. So they have to explain their role in a situation. How did they act in that situation? And what was the outcome or the result of that situation? There's a lot of different techniques that you can use in behavioral interviewing. And so the one that I like is the STAR technique, which is you describe the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So they all follow, different techniques follow the same principles. I just believe the STAR method is pretty easy to use, and it stays intact pretty easily. So a situation, you're going to describe a situation, let the person know to draw upon their experiences. And this can be a tough one, especially if you get someone who has not had a lot of work experience. You may need to kind of help guide them, that they can look at their previous work experience, what happened in school, or any volunteer positions. Because sometimes they just can't think that quickly on their feet as far as what previous experience they've had, and sometimes you kind of have to help coach them a little bit. Give enough detail so that the interviewee understands what you want to know about them and how they handled the situation. Behavioral-based interview questions, if they're not written well, can kind of feel to the interviewee that they're being tricked or that they don't have enough information to answer the question. So you want to make sure that you give enough detail so they feel comfortable with the question and they understand what it is that you need from them. And again, practice on interview questions, on these behavioral-based questions. They're tough to kind of get started on. When you talk about the task, so you want to find out what the task at hand or the goal of what they were working on was. And the action, you want them to describe in their own words what their action was and how they contributed to a situation. So if they start saying, well, this person did this, you want to know what they specifically did. So you do want to guide them back to find out what they did, not how other people contributed to the situation. Results. You want them to always describe the outcome to you. What were the results and what they did? Again, not what others did. And continue with follow-up questions until you get an answer. And I would say that sometimes you have to think about how you're framing that question because maybe they're not understanding what you're needing from them. And if you have follow-up questions, limit to 2 or 3. If they can't get it, then move on to the next question, because otherwise you're going to frustrate that interviewee, and maybe your interview question wasn't real good, or maybe in fact they didn't understand it, and maybe that'll give you a clue as to whether or not you'll go through hiring them or not, whether they could understand that question. You always want to know about someone's ability to work in a team environment, especially in this day and age. That's all we do all day long. So this is an example of a team-based behavioral interview question. And I'm sure some of you had these situations. And the question would be, since you're interviewing for a front desk position, please tell me about a time when you had to put your work aside to help another team member complete a task. So that would be the question. Much better than just saying, are you a good team player? This will get you a lot more information. So then they can kind of talk about the situation. What action did they take? How did they decide that helping with the situation, helping with their task took priority with completing work of your own? That's always a good follow-up question because it gives you an idea of how they prioritize or how they think and how they make those decisions. And what was the result of taking this action? So that would be a good example of a teamwork behavioral-based question. And then we all know that customer service is at the root of what we do, especially now. The healthcare field is extremely competitive, and so you want to provide the best possible customer service to everyone. So this question would hopefully help you obtain whether this person is good at customer service or how they've handled things. Tell me about a time when you made sure a patient received really good customer service. Really good customer service. What action did you take? And again, you want specifics. You want to follow that star. So you want the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So what was the outcome of that good customer service that you had? And then there's always the difficult patient. We've all had those. And so you want to really find out about a time when you had a difficult patient and how did you handle that? How did you resolve that situation? What was the outcome of that event? And so again, instead of just saying, do you have good customer service or are you able to handle a difficult patient? With either one of those questions, you'll just get a yes. Here you're going to find out exactly what they did to resolve that situation and what the outcome of that situation was. And those are two really good questions for customer service. And then the problem-solving slide. When we learn from our successes or failures, tell me about a time when you learned a valuable lesson, when you had a success or had something failed at work or school. And again, sometimes, just remember, sometimes you're dealing with people that don't have a lot of work experience. So you kind of have to give them that edge that says school or volunteer experience again. But you want to have them draw back, again, back based on their past experiences. What have they learned and how have they solved this problem moving forward? So again, I think from those four slides so far, you've learned that these can be really different than asking just a closed-ended question. And another teamwork one is, give me an example of when you had a change on your team and how did you adapt to those changes and how did the change impact you in a positive way? How did you impact that? And in this day and age, with everything changing so quickly within organizations and in the medical field, it's really important that you get someone on board that can really adapt to change. And so you want to make sure that you can have that as part of your repertoire of questions that you're going to ask someone, and that should be part of your list as to how they're going to adapt to change. And the best decisions that you can make is you'll never make a perfect decision when it comes to hiring people. And if you hire enough people, you will hire eventually the wrong person for one of your jobs. But behavioral-based interviewing can help you with that selection. Do any of you have any current questions on behavioral-based interviewing? And you can use the chat function to just kind of type in those questions. Or any questions on the employment law?
And this is Allison. I have a question. I was wondering if you could talk about what you've seen are common roadblocks for people when they're moving from some of those closed questions to more open behavioral-based questions. Are there any common challenges in trying to figure out what to ask or how, or any pushback there?
Yes, I think that it's really hard for people to move away from those closed-ended questions. Now, remember when you're interviewing someone, you employ the 80-20 rule, and that is as an interview, the person doing the interview, you should only be speaking 20% of the time. So you should only be asking the questions and the follow-up questions and allowing that interviewee to speak 80% of the interview time. And the biggest mistake people make is that as an interviewer, they sit down and start telling the person about the organization and about everything that they do there at the organization, which is all a great way to open an interview. But unfortunately, during that time, they don't stop and listen to the person they're actually interviewing. So it is very important to have a select set of questions laid out, have your ranking next to them, have all that information laid out so that you know that that interview is going to be consistent across all the people you're going to interview, and also that you have those questions embedded within those open-ended questions too. You have to have both. I mean, you're not going to just have behavioral-based questions. And look at those open-ended questions and decide which ones you can turn into behavioral-based questions. And there's a great resource. This gentleman did a huge amount of work on behavioral-based questions, and I will send you the link. I think it's hsu.edu. He's down in Alabama, and he has them all listed out. So whether you're looking at adaptability, whether you're looking at teamwork, you're looking at customer service, kind of all those attributes that you're looking for, he has probably 8 questions under each area. And it's right there online. So it's a great resource. And I will send you the link to send out to all the participants also. Any other questions?
Hi, Ann. This is Mariah. We had somebody ask, I've often asked the question, give me an example of a time when your work was criticized. Sometimes people say they can't think of a time. How do you follow up with that, or is it an automatic red flag?
When their work was criticized?
Yes, and they can't think of a way to answer that. Yep.
I think probably the way that I would handle that is not just asking them about their work being criticized, but say, you know, everyone has projects or has work that's not done up to the standards. I mean, at some point, somebody has that happen. So kind of giving them, setting the stage that it's okay to say that you failed at that might help solicit a response from them, because they might be afraid of actually saying what they've been criticized for without having that out. That would be my first suggestion. So frame it in a sense of everyone has work that's criticized at times or isn't at 100%. How do you handle the feedback of that, or what kind of projects have you had that have turned out like that, and what have you done to make sure that doesn't happen in the future? So that's how I would handle that question. I would expand it a little bit further. Any other questions?
We did just have another one come in. Is there a good way to break through a person's obvious nervousness, especially when you suspect that they don't interview well?
And that's entirely possible. Some people just don't interview well, and so you do have to kind of break that ice with people. And remember, when you do your interviews, they should be not exactly the same, but they need to be consistent for each person. So I think that anything you can do to make them feel at ease, and of course there's just some basic things, which is make sure that you have a space that is good for an interview. It can be your office, it can be different places, so make sure that it's kind of cleaned up, that your phone is on mute, or that it's, you know, you're not going to get tons of interruptions, because that really makes the person feel uncomfortable right off the bat. Additionally, they don't know what's coming, so they are nervous. So you might want to just walk them around the building a little bit and say, can I get you a cup of coffee? Make it as casual of an environment as you can. I think that's the best way to find out who someone really is. So one of the best interviews that I was a part of is we actually were interviewing for an executive level position, but we did not handle it in a traditional sense. We actually drove them around. Now this took several hours, and this was an executive level position, so it was a little different. But we actually drove them around in a car and showed them our different sites and had them interact with the staff at each site. And then when we got in the car, there was actually 2 of us, so one person would just kind of casually start the conversation and be asking questions while the driver drove them around. So putting someone at ease, you'll find out a lot more about them. And there are people that just don't interview well, but they might know their job really well. So I would definitely do whatever you can to make them feel at ease and just say, I wouldn't call them out and say, oh, are you nervous? But if they say they're nervous, just reaffirm that they don't need to be, that you just want to have a conversation with them and find out a little about them. So, and, just a little chit-chat about the organization and even asking about the weather and, things like that can help put someone at ease to feel like they're okay interviewing with you.
Great, and we had one more question. How can you test your questions prior to interviews to make sure they make sense to the interviewee?
That's a good question, and that is something that's really important. And I would use other staff to do that. I would use family members to do that. I would just start asking the questions to myself and say, does that make sense? Practice is the key for behavioral-based interviewing. And I think it is important that you do test those questions because you need to find out, you need to figure out when you write a question. I mean, that's a whole other process when you write a question. What are you looking for in the answer? If you're looking for something very specific, then that question needs to be guided so that that's where you get. Does that make sense? That's where you're trying to get to. You don't want to give the answer away. You need to make sure you're asking a question that it doesn't just go off into nowhere land with someone, but that they understand the question. So I would say definitely use it with other staff. Use it with someone who doesn't know the organization. Call a girlfriend, call a friend, and just say, "Can I run this question by you? And if you could answer this, how does that sound to you? How does that land on you?" To solicit a response. But definitely test your questions.
All right, that's great.
Way too much from people that you don't want to know. And that is important too, also, to just kind of keep things on a business level. You don't want to hear about their kids or the babysitter or how they handled this in a family situation. That's not the things you want to know. So kind of up front, set the stage that please use your past experience with work or volunteer or something like that to give me an example of how you've handled this situation. And again, you don't want to give the answer away, but people are they get nervous when behavioral-based questions come up if they've never encountered them before. As an interviewee, they don't know quite how to respond because you're asking them to think differently. They're used to open-ended questions or very technical-based questions. This is not. This is about their behavior in the past. And so sometimes you just have to give them time to think about it. And you may need to kind of use some prodding questions in the meantime, like, well, did you ever have, you said you were part of the football team. Can you give me an example on the football team when someone wasn't a team player? How did you interact with that situation? Or how did you impact that situation? So by kind of getting to know them a little bit, you might be able to help them with that situation or help them think outside the box because it's not easy. Any other questions?
All right. Just the rest of our questions are about any additional resources you might recommend, and I think that is something you were about to cover.
Yes, it is. So the resources, there's a ton of resources, and they're not. There's, of course, the Star 2 Center, which I think is fabulous. It's chcworkforce.org. There is a ton of information on this website. And, of course, the Star 2 Center is who's doing this webinar today. But there really is. There is this plethora of information on that website. And so it's very easy to find. So I would definitely use that. And, again, they provide the training and technical assistance for all sorts of different places. The NAC, if you're not familiar with the National Association of Community Health Centers, they also have a clinical workforce and recruitment and retention information on their website too. And I believe that's also included, isn't it, on the CHC workforce? I think the two go hand in hand, but the clinical workforce. Yeah, I was going to say I'm pretty sure I saw it there too. And that's a living document that they update regularly also. So that is very helpful. And then you can also, if you're a member of NAP, you can sign on and get information on their My NAP page. The other things that I would look at, I don't suspect that all of you are community health centers, but there's state primary care associations that work with a variety of health organizations, and they have a lot of information there also. Also your regional primary care associations. The National Health Service Corps is a great resource for recruitment. Here in Colorado, we have something called Mission Driven Careers, and I'm sure there's a lot of nonprofit websites in all the different states. There's also the nonprofit Colorado Job Board, but there's also different places that post nonprofit jobs. So definitely look into that within your area or within your site. Never forget social media. It's one of those things that you either hate it or you love it, but it doesn't matter if you like it or not. You need to be using it for recruitment and for retention of staff, and that would be your LinkedIn, Google+, yes, and even Facebook. And on Facebook, make sure that you have an organizational site, because the idea is that you want to retain people, or if you're advertising people, you want to use those dollars and your time in the best way possible. And then when you actually get them in for an interview, you're going to employ those behavioral-based questions. But don't forget those social media sites. They are fabulous for connecting people. And like I said, whether you like it or not, they're here, and you need to use them. Additionally, don't forget about those other sites for recruitment. When you look at, when I was working for Salud, we had great response from Craigslist for both our pharmacists and our dental assistants in one specific site. Why that was, I don't know. But we would track that, and that's where we would find those people interested in those positions. So there's also sites like dice.com that you might want to use for IT professionals. But look at kind of each position individually and uniquely. Don't expect that you're going to find people on every site in the same place. You're probably not going to find a physician on Craigslist. But we did happen to find dentists and dental, or pharmacists and dental assistants on Craigslist, which was just very strange to us. And then you may be in a small community where the local paper works really well. But additionally, when you're looking at that, kind of blanket your resources. So if you're in a remote area, say of Iowa, what is it that is so great about living there? Maybe it's that you get to pheasant hunt, or you get to fish, or you have just that open country. Well, you're probably not going to recruit someone from a bigger city to move out there, but you might recruit somebody from South Dakota that might want to work there. So be sure when you're looking at your advertising dollars, don't just do it locally, but maybe you want to expand to those states, or maybe that person is living, or maybe they're in Montana, or maybe they're in Wyoming, and they'd like to move to Iowa to be closer to a family member or whatever. But go after who you're looking for. And just the same way, if you're looking for someone who comes to their interview and they're carrying a Coach purse and they're kind of dressed to the nines, they probably aren't a good fit for one of your remote sites. They're probably a good fit maybe for one of your city sites. Or if you have someone that likes to participate in different outdoor activities that are like biking, hiking, things like that, then you want to target that site, target those groups that do those things. And so kind of think about really what it is your culture is and what is your environment. Again, getting back to that unemployment rate, what is your environment of your clinic? Do you all like to work out? Do you all like to do potlucks? What is it? And try to find a good fit for that person that likes that same type of culture. And then you won't have to be recruiting for anyone. But also employ the local chamber of commerce, your state tourism offices. They have a lot of free material that they will give you and that you can use for marketing material. And so definitely employ that. Make sure your website is up to date and that there is a clear way for people to actually apply for your organization. Does anyone have any other questions on that?
It looks like we have no further questions right now.
Give it a minute. Does anybody have any other questions that are outside of behavioral interviewing, I guess, on the recruitment process? But I would definitely go back to the recruitment plan and look at what your recruitment plan is, because those 6 areas that you need to really focus in on, besides just the question selection, it is really making sure you have your non-discrimination plan in place and making sure that that's an active plan. Really know what your organization's philosophy is and outline whose responsibilities it is to recruit. And I would say that it's pretty much an organizational effort to recruit most positions. So make sure that you've got that in place. Really, how is that outlined? Again, where you're going to advertise. Don't forget social media. Don't forget the good old newspaper. Don't forget the journals, etc. Just depending on what is your target audience. Who do you want to attract? Go after those people. And then make sure you have a fair and equitable selection process in place. And that's kind of done before you actually start the interviews. Make sure you have your interview questions together, but none of your interview questions can be discriminatory in any way. Making sure you have a template for interviewing so that it's easy for anyone to do the interviews. And when I say that, make sure, again, you're consistent. If you're interviewing 5 people for a medical assistant position, you should have the same 5, the 5 people that are being interviewed should be interviewed by the same person. So you don't have 5 different people interviewing 5 different applicants. You want to make sure it's consistent and that process is fair to all the applicants. You also want to make sure that you have a good application process and that your application questions are legal and that you don't have things that could be discriminatory on your application. And then on your selection process, again, just make sure you have a process. That is huge. A lot of people just kind of make a decision because they like someone. Well, there is part of that goes into the selection process, but there's still probably 90% of it should be also how did they do in the interview, how did they rank, and then you might have 2 people that are equal and maybe that one person you just kind of click with better. That's a good fit for you, and that's okay. But make sure that you have an objective selection process when it comes down to it in the end. And probably the biggest mistake that people also make besides asking closed-ended questions is they want to hire someone without realizing it that's like them. And sometimes for your team, you don't want a bunch of yous on your team. You want a lot of individuals on your team that can work in a team environment. That doesn't mean that they necessarily think like you or can imitate you, but you want someone who's an independent thinker. And so make sure you look at that also.
And this is Allison. We did have one more question come through, and somebody wanted to know if there are any great recruitment plan templates that you can recommend. Here at the Star Center, we're working on one right now, and that should be available in the next couple of months. And we do have some cataloged on our website. But Ann, did you have any specific ones you've used or know of that you could recommend?
Well, I think the ones that you have, I've looked at those, are absolutely fantastic. What the information that you can get off the Star 2 Center is really good information. And again, the template really, I mean, you can put as many elements into it as you want. The ones that I found have these elements that are outlined, the 6 elements that I have on the recruitment plan. And it's just a matter of really getting that plan in place. It doesn't have to be anything more than, you know, kind of your policy written out. It's, this is how you're going to handle recruitment. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it just gives people the framework to stay within or work within. And so, again, you know, a basic statement that you're going to not discriminate in the hiring process, and you're going to follow these laws when you do so. And that's just common sense to some extent, and to some extent people just need that reminder that this is a process that needs to, this is a legal process. It's not something that is just, I'm going to hire my best friend because I like them. You can get in a lot of trouble for doing that. So you need to make sure that you're following a process. And then what is your philosophy around hiring? It doesn't have to be, again, a whole, you know, 5-page policy. But again, what is your philosophy around hiring? And it could be to ensure that we hire the best people for the organization. It could be something simple as that. And then, again, where you're going to advertise. That's just important because so many people forget, like, oh, I meant to, you know, hire here, or, oh, I forgot that this worked last time. And so there's just so many venues now. It used to be just a Sunday paper. There's so many different places to go to advertise now. That's important to start getting those written down and what's worked for which positions. And again, I would just say don't think that not all positions are alike. So you want to target those advertising dollars to different areas of what works. So it might be LinkedIn, it might be Google+, it might be your Facebook page. You know, the best way to get someone that's good is through word of mouth for your own staff. So if you don't have maybe a recruitment bonus, if they bring in someone that they know and they both stay, say, the next 6 months, maybe you give them, you know, $100 or $200 or something like that. That is cheaper than running an ad pretty much anywhere. So make sure you're looking at all those areas of how you identify where you're going to advertise, and give your opportunity to those good employees first. Try to find someone. But don't underestimate the power of social media. Even on LinkedIn, you can say you're going after physicians. You can target physicians specifically with your advertisement. So just don't underestimate those tools that are already kind of there, and they don't cost much.
Great. Thank you so much, Ann. Looks like we don't have any other questions on the line at this time. And I see your contact information is up on the screen. Any last words for our faithful participants?
I just want to tell everyone thank you. We got through the first webinar, and it was a lot of fun, and I hope that this information is really valuable moving forward as far as behavioral-based interview questions. Please implement them into your repertoire of questions that you ask applicants. Like I said, I will get that to Allison, this gentleman who did them for this university, and he has a great list of questions that's right there on Google, so I will share that with Allison, and she can send that out also. But they're really important. They're really great to use, and I just want to see if I have one more resource. The one resource that I do have that I would recommend, it sounds kind of funny, but it's the Ultimate Job Search Kit, and it's something that you can order online, and it's actually for interviewees to get prepared for interviews. But you can kind of flip the usage of that and use it for your interview questions, if that makes sense. And it's a bunch of flashcards, it's about 500 flashcards that really target specific areas. So whether you're looking at teamwork, customer service, company information, assertiveness, clarification, creativity and imagination. They have several that just deal with that. Describe a time when you presented an innovative idea to your manager. What was the concept? How did you come up with that different idea? It might be dealing with ambiguity. So tell me about a time when you had to postpone a decision, even though you wanted to make the decision right then. Why did you hesitate? Again, what was the outcome of that? If you're hiring someone for leadership, describe a time when you had to be persuasive to get others to buy into your idea. How did you prepare your presentation? How did you get others on board? And what was the outcome of that? So there's a whole bunch of questions in here that I think would be really helpful for anybody. It's called the Ultimate Job Search Kit. Again, it's supposed to be for someone looking for a job, but it's something that you can reverse and use to your benefit as an organization when you're writing those questions.
Thank you so much, Ann, for that last information and for your entire presentation today. A lot of great ideas and information. And again, for folks, we're going to have this recording, handouts, and any other resources that Ann shares available on our website very soon. Again, that's chcworkforce.org. Please check it out. Look for things, ask us questions. Let us know what you need and how we can be helpful. We live to serve for all your recruitment and retention needs. So thanks again to Ann, thanks to our team member Mariah who ran this webinar today, and thanks to all of you for your participation. We'd so appreciate if you filled out the eval that's going to pop out when you exit today's webinar, and please be in touch with any questions or concerns. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yes, thank you, and yes, please fill out the evaluations because it can only get better. It's like anything else, so you just need to keep getting better.
Thank you all. We're ending today's webinar. Bye-bye.